Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to this segment of Khoj Gurbani's a-sabad-a-day. The recitation is from Sri Rag Ki War, Slok Mahalla Tija. Padh Padh Pandit Bedh Vakhaneh, Maya Moh Suaye, Duje Bhai Har Naam Visarya, Man Murkh Mile Sajaye, Jin Jio Pind Ditta, Tis Kabhu Na Chete, Jo Dendar Jag Sambahe, Jam Ka Paha Galo Na Kattiye, Phir Aave Jaye, Manmukh Kichu Na Suje Andale, Purab Likhya Kamaye, Pure Bhag Satgur Mile, Sukh Data, Naam Vase Mani Aaye, Sukh Manne, Sukh Penna, Sukhe Sukh Vihaye, Nanak So Nao Mano Na Visare, Jit Dar Sache So Bapaye, Mahalla Tija, Satguru Sev Sukh Paya, Sach Naam Guntas, Gurmati Pachhaniya, Ram Naam Pargas, Sacho Sach Kamavana, Vadiai Vadde Paas, Jio Pind Sab Tiska, Sift Kare Ardas, Sache Sabd Salahana, Sukhe Sukh Nivas, Jap Tap Sanjam Mane Mahe, Bin Nave Trigan Jivas, Gurmati Na Paiya, Manmukh Moh Nivinas, Jio Pave Tyo Rakh Tu, Nanak Tera Das Paudi, Sabko Tera Tu Sabsda, Tu Sabna Ras, Sab Tudde Paso Mang De, Nit Kar Ardas, Jis Tu De, Tis Sab Kich Mila, Ikna Dur Hai Paas, Tud Bajo Thao Ko Nahi, Jis Paso Mangiya, Man Vekho Ko Nirjas, Sab Tudde No Salahiya, Dar Guru Mukhano Pargas. The Pandit, who is singled out here in the first passage, is driven by self-interest, namely that of making a living, survival in other words. Padh Padh Pandit Bedh Vakhaneh, Maya Moh Swai, out of self-interest. So the example of a Pandit has been used really to point at us collectively, because like the Pandit, we too are indoctrinated, imprinted and shaped by our environment, by the milieu that we live in, to act and to behave in particular ways. The conditioning of the mind is what this is, and it is essential for survival. And so our actions are nothing more than conditioned responses based on the environment that we are born into. And the belief systems that we acquire help us translate and affix meaning to the external world. In other words, makes it possible for us to actually navigate through life. And they also provide the social glue that is necessary to hold communities together. Now, the thing is, and this is the contrast that this passage is going to bring out, is that while a conditioned conscience or a conditioned mind is necessary for survival in the external world, and in fact it is very efficient as well. Imagine not having this conditioning and having to sort of do every action all over again every time you do it. So it is necessary for survival. It's not a bad thing, but we'll see there is a price to be paid for that. So cultural conditioning, while necessary, has an undesirable consequence from the perspective of our evolutionary growth. That's the key. While it is necessary for survival, it is not so good for our evolution to the next level of consciousness. So it is a paradox of sorts. The very conditioning that ensures our survival also thickens and coagulates our ego self, the haume. And haume then effectively shuts off our capacity to experience our true source, which is the Har. And as this passage says, Duje pae har naam visarya, man murkh mile sujai. Duje pae, simply acting out of the ego in love of the sensational world. Har naam visarya. The naam, the Har, is forgotten. That capacity is shut off. And what happens is, murkh mile sujai. There is a heavy price to be paid for this conditioning, because self-perpetuating behavior, which is what this conditioning is, has been likened here to a death noose around one's neck. You know, the noose is a loose and running knot that tightens as you pull on it. Likewise, the more you do of the same thing, the conditioning thickens. Jamaka paha galona katiya, phir aave jai. This becomes like a noose. The conditioning is what cements you within a particular behavior pattern. So the idea is that we have to somehow cut through this noose, this conditioning. And that is like trying to see your blind spot. Now, the blind spot concerns not so much what or why we are doing something, but who we are when we are doing something. And that distinction is important. Who are we when we are performing that action, and from which inner place are we acting? Are we acting as an ego self, or are we acting as the Har within, the creator self within? That should be the source of our actions, because that self does not see the world as a static one like the ego self does. Rather, it sees the world as a dynamic whole that is very fluid, unbounded, and is forever manifesting, changing, expressing itself. And it is this awareness that we need, and which has been stolen from us because of our conditioning, that causes us to behave like the Pandit is, for survival. We cannot think beyond survival. And to make the shift in this perspective requires Gur wisdom. And what Gur wisdom does is transform the quality of our lived experience. That is what it is all about. You have to ask yourself, what is the quality of my lived experience? And then go from there. Until the next time, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.